DuckTalks is part of Res TV's network of podcasts. Check out res.tv for other great podcasts. It's the week of Monday, June the 24th, and you're listening to episode 71 of DuckTalks. Hey there, and welcome to another episode of DuckTalks. We're glad to have you. It's an exciting episode. We've been looking forward to this for some time. You may have seen on social media, we've been kind of teasing this one because we're so excited about it. And man, I'm just going to say it. We're going to interview Matt Danner tonight, and it's going to be awesome. My name's Mitch. I've got Pirate Steven and Josh with me.
Ahoy there.
Hey guys, it's happening. We're doing an interview. I'm excited. Sorry.
Yeah, it's funny how we set these interviews up so far in advance, and it's hard to get everyone's schedule to mesh to pull this off. But we're glad to have Matt on tonight. It's going to be awesome.
And the topic is something that, and we've talked about it on the podcast, because people ask, when are you going to talk about Legend of the Three Caballeros? And we say, as soon as we can, talk about Legend of the Three Caballeros. And we're going to get to talk about it tonight. It's awesome. We were even joking about it last week, that we don't know when the show's happening. And so maybe we get some answers tonight. We find out a little bit more about when the show's happening. But before we get to that, we're going to go through just a couple of things. We've just got a couple of items here. First things first, man, we've had a great outpouring of support on social media. I mean, it's not like every 5 minutes or anything. So, I mean, feel free to send us another one. But it's been great this week. We've had a number of people reach out and say, hey, you were talking about new listeners. I'm a new listener, or I've been listening for a while and I've never reached out. It's been really awesome. Some people found the show through some tweets that we had, which is why we're on social media, so people can find out about the podcast and we can talk about this stuff, because we've said this from the beginning. The whole point of this is to have a conversation about this stuff. We love these properties. We want to see them succeed and be popular and people to know about them. And it's like every week, new people find DuckTales and the Disney Afternoon, or that there's community around the Disney Afternoon. So we had some feedback again this week, and that's great. If you enjoy the podcast, definitely go to your favorite podcatcher. I'm usually watching iTunes. It's hard for me to check Google or anything else. I've been trying to find some people who are on there who could maybe let me know that there's reviews that I don't know about on those other platforms. But we definitely check iTunes for new reviews, and we've got one. So we appreciate DGB_1991 gave us a 5-star review.
And that's 5 out of 5, right?
That is 5 out of 5. Yeah, it's not 10.
That's a lot. That's a lot of stars.
It's a lot of stars. And they said, this podcast is a blast and very informative on my favorite show. I enjoy watching the episodes, then hearing these guys really dig into the episode themselves, and also they keep me up to date on my DuckTales merch news. These guys seem really genuine and great, and I love interacting with them on Twitter as well. My favorite podcast at the moment. Oh, shucks.
Wow, that's an honor. Wow.
It really is, because there's a lot of podcasts out there. They could be listening to anything, and we really appreciate that. It was really great. We do the show as an outpouring of our fandom, and we just enjoy interacting with everyone else and enjoying their fandom as well. So I think it's awesome. And thanks for the feedback. If you'd like to send us some feedback, definitely do it on your podcatcher of choice, because that's going to let other people know about the podcast. And then, you know, if you're not subscribing, if you're listening to it online or Spotify or however else you're listening to us, you can always shoot us an email at ducktalkspod@gmail.com. And we did have some more emails that we're not going to have an opportunity to get to this week, but we will try to get to them next week. We have a little bit of news to hit on before we start speaking with Matt. And I think first things first, it's probably the biggest thing that the Duck fans are talking about online right now, and that is the Mexico Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards, and the fact that DuckTales has been nominated for the animation category. That's pretty big news, right? I remember watching the Kids' Choice Awards when I was a wee little one, or preteen or whatever.
Yeah, and if they win, they'll get this really cool orange blimp that says Nickelodeon on it. And, you know, I know it's one of Frank Angonez's dream to own that blimp. And you know what? If we keep voting for him, because if I know that the DuckTales community can do anything, I know it's online voting. So if we can get online voting going and get DuckTales to win this award, Frank might even get slimed, which I know a lot of people would be into. On the show, Nickelodeon's known for slime. They dump it on his head. But yeah, Frank has given us a little incentive to vote as well. If we want Donald to come home from the moon, you better vote for him. And then the second incentive, because you don't want to be all mean about it, second incentive is we'll find out Huey and Dewey Louie's dad. It's probably Launchpad.
Dun, dun, dun.
If we vote him awards. And DuckTales, I feel like, has really gotten snubbed for a lot of awards. We're not biased or anything, but we think it's our favorite show out there. And I feel like it should have won an Emmy by now.
Especially for some of its amazing songs that they've had so far. I saw Frank said that we can vote like multiple times for this thing, right?
Well, I'm sure Frank is voting like 10 times every minute, but
there's a cap. I'm not proud to admit that there's a cap to how many times you can vote in a period of time, but it'll eventually send you to a page.
I just know, like, because I can't read the site at all. It's like I go and then I hit the button and then I'm like, did I vote? Did it go? I don't know what's going on.
Well, that's originally how it happened. Was I hit it and nothing happened, so I tapped it again and again and again and maybe a few more times, and then I got this page. I was like, oh, maybe that was too many.
Yeah, so we know DuckTales is getting the votes for this award. I'm a little leery though, because there are some at least one Nickelodeon show in this batch. There's some stiff competition here. We don't know how crazy all the other communities are with voting, but The Loud House, I believe, is a Nickelodeon show, and that's up for it as well. So fingers crossed that we find out that DuckTales won this award and Donald's coming home and Launchpad's the dad. And we should find out. I don't know when this thing is going to be announced, but hopefully it's soon.
You don't really want Launchpad to be their dad, right?
We don't know. Could be Gold. Who knows?
Oh, man. Don't start that. We're going to get email.
There's no shipping on this show.
You don't ship. I'm just saying.
I would love for them to tell that story. I don't know what the chances of them winning. Like you said, with there being Nickelodeon shows and I've questioned, how does this voting system work if you can vote multiple times?
Who knows? I mean, stranger things have happened.
Yep. I'll include the link in the show notes so that people can follow it if they haven't already voted. Of course, we've been talking about it on social media, so if you're following us over on Twitter, you probably already know about it. You've probably already voted. And but yeah, keep doing that, I guess. That's how this thing is decided, with as many votes as you can get out there.
Yeah, and I put together a tweet, because you can also tweet a vote in with appropriate hashtags. And I put together a tweet that has 12 votes on it. So if people retweet that, that's automatic 12 votes for DuckTales. So, right? I'm doing my part. I'm trying to figure out if Donald's coming home. Because I feel like Frank is crazy enough just to do this.
The last couple of podcasts, we've talked about Entertainment Earth's exclusive Scrooge Mcduck Pop. This is the red coat pop. They advertise it to be matching the current show, the current DuckTales, as well as the classic video game and comic books. The pop released sometime in June. I got mine, I think, middle of the week. I think Pirate got it a day or two before I got mine. And when we checked to continue sharing this merchandise, this pop, when we checked to continue sharing this pop with our followers, Pirate found that it is actually sold out.
Yeah, it's sold out at Entertainment Earth, but you know what? I know a lot of shops, maybe comic book shops, or there's secondary market like eBay, have the pop available. So You could probably get it for close to around the regular price, which I believe was $13 plus tax and shipping. Not tax, but yeah, plus shipping. So I think I paid $20 for it, but it looks really cool next to the blue suit Scrooge Mcduck Pop, and I feel like it's essential, especially for, as we've been saying all along, read the comics and this new show with the red coat. It's kind of more classic than even the blue one. So it is just a paint job, but I like it. I think it looks pretty sweet next to the original release.
Yeah, I can't believe how fast they sold out on that. I kind of held off on getting pre-ordered, and I missed out on getting. So I'm gonna have to try and get it on one of the secondary markets.
Yeah,
so
I've gotten burnt so many times that I don't even hesitate anymore.
Yeah, it does look like it's a pretty awesome pop, and I'm hoping that with how popular it's been, we'll get more of the 2017 pops.
Yeah, the back of the box has, the whole box is 2017 art. Like, it's from the DuckTales logo to the back of actually being Scrooge McDuck from the 2017 version. So hopefully, whether it be exclusives or not, they can, and Funko loves releasing products. So hopefully they can just pump out as much as they need to from the new show, because people are foaming at the mouth for more merchandise. We want Fat Mojo to get their stuff out as well. We don't know if the hiatus has moved plans at all for the release date. I'm trying to get more information from my contacts, but haven't got it yet. As soon as we know more information about more merchandise release, such as the Fat Mojo figures, we'll let everybody know, though.
We had a lot of people respond to that tweet when you made the announcement that it was sold out. There was a lot of people that were holding off and waiting, but I'm looking right now. I see it on eBay for like $14.79. That's not too far off. I paid, like you said, $13.99 plus shipping. And I think my state charges tax when you order online. So I was in the same boat, close to $20 on that one. So that's you can still get it. You're just not going to be able to order it directly from Entertainment Earth, and their shipping took a while. But I guess it was because it took a while to release, because it was supposed to come out in May and then it got pushed back. It's a great pop. I love it. It made it into my display. If y'all saw that tweet. Yeah,
looks good, man.
I just need 2 more bat cases.
They get addictive. But we like the bat case, especially if you're out of box collector for figures or pop figures or whatnot. But they look great in like a baseball bat case that you can buy from Michaels.
Yeah, I'm really happy with the way mine looks. And
yes, please, Funko, if you're listening.
Yeah, we kind of lucked out as well from no San Diego Comic-Con exclusives. So those were usually hard ones to pick up. I think our next exclusive batch would be New York Comic-Con, and that's not even till October.
Well, and this is something that's not in our notes, but we know that online Frank has alluded to maybe there being some interesting posters or merchandise at San Diego Comic-Con this year. He made the comment that he didn't really tell us what's going on at D23. I think there's not a lot they can share, but he did point out to someone online that they wanted to keep their eye open for what's going to be brought out at San Diego Comic-Con, and it's got us pretty excited. I know that day we had a lot of conversations going on around those tweets.
We're gonna have to have a podcast of predictions for San Diego Comic-Con for DuckTales.
Yeah, we need to book Frank for the week after San Diego Comic-Con and hold him to it.
Well, I think that's going to do it for all the news and the merchandise that we kind of had pressing that we wanted to make sure we covered this week. Of course, next week we'll be back to talk about anything that's happened or anything that we missed, because, every Tuesday morning we message in our group chat. We always talk about all the things that we forgot to talk about.
with our guest, Matt Danner. Yay!
We said earlier that we were going to be talking with Matt Danner tonight. We're excited to have him on the phone right now. We can't wait to talk about the Three Cabs. We know that you guys have been hitting us with emails and messages on Twitter and just all over the place wanting to know when we'll talk about it. And we kept telling you, when we can talk about it, we'll talk about it. Behind the scenes, we were talking with Matt a little bit about, hey, we'd love to have you on the show. And Matt's been awesome about wanting to come on and talk with everybody and talk about this project. And things have finally aligned where the show's kind of official. It's out there. It's been made. And he can talk about it. And so we're going to talk tonight. So I want to welcome Matt Danner to DuckTalks. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Hi, everybody.
It's been a wild ride with this show, and we're going to talk about Three Cabs in a little bit because people want to talk about it, want to know about it, and we can't wait to hear from you. But we wanted, whenever we talk with someone in the animation, we like to kind of get, your backstory. We want to know a little bit more about who you are and, how you got into animation. So that's going to be the first question that I have for you tonight is, Matt, how'd you get into animation?
Well, I started real early. When I was in high school, I was going to a school called Los Angeles County High School for the Arts, or a LACSA. And what was really cool about that is it was a magnet high school that actually had college level art programs. So I got in for visual, fine art and illustration. While I was there, I got into, I always knew I wanted to do cartoons, but while I was there, I got to get into computer animation. And believe it or not, I got into a lot of theater programs as well, because they do theater, music, dance, And so I sort of balanced between art classes and theater classes. I learned TV studio. I learned, how to, shoot with camera and edit and things like that while learning how to model. And at the time it was Cinema 4D, and I think the program was called was it Strata? No, but Cinema 4D was like what I learned in, and then eventually I heard they switched over to Maya after I left, but I didn't learn that till much later. And a little bit of Flash. So then while I was in high school, I started doing animation work, and I started doing cartoons and stuff after school. And then when I graduated, I had made friends with these Australian creators named Eddie Morton, Lily Chin, and they created a show called Mucha Lucha, which was the first television Flash show in the U.S. I say in the U.S. because sometimes we go, it's the first television Flash show ever, and then someone goes, yeah, well, Canada did it first, and I'm like, I'm sure they did. But so I was actually going to move to Australia to work on the show. But they ended up setting up shop mostly at Warner Brothers Animation in Sherman Oaks. And so I just stayed here and worked on the show there. And that's how I got into the union. And that's how I got into doing storyboards for TV. I'd done a little bit, but this was my first real gig, which was good because I hadn't gone to college yet. And my folks were kind of pressuring me about well, get a job or go to college. And I was like, all right. And I was, starting to work on going to colleges. I was going to go to Pratt Art Institute in New York. And, but then this job came up and I was like, well, I got to see this through, and it's never ended. So that was almost 20 years ago. So, and then, from there I got into directing and producing and development, and I developed a ton of shows, and eventually worked on them. One of the shows was Shaolin Showdown, was one of my first big shows where I helped sell the show, and I, was the art director I would say character art director. I storyboarded the whole intro and then did boards on every episode, and eventually got into TV directing then. And I believe I was 19 at the time, and I was directing for TV, which is, I guess, some sort of record somewhere. Wow. On some planet. And then, then from there, it's funny because I kept going back and forth, from production into development, because I had such a handle on Flash as well as traditional. I learned both at the same time. And I mean X sheets. Like I can still write X sheets. I'm one of 3 people that can still do that. Actually, that's not true. There's way more people, but it's a lot rarer these days. And because Warner Brothers was trying to sort of bank pilots quicker and get development done quicker, we were doing a lot of pilots in Flash, whether or not they would be animated that way. So we did, Shell and Showdown, Johnny Test, Coconut Fred. We did some Scooby stuff. That there was a Scooby Doo. It was Shaggy and Scooby Get a Clue. Was a version that we did some initial stuff. We did a bunch of stuff for Cartoon Network, which a lot of it, most of these pilots probably never aired. But it was one of those things where we were just trying to like kick them out and get them in front of focus tests and kind of get the green light, and it worked. And then meanwhile, during that, I got into acting. Because I was kind of a loud and obnoxious kid on the 3rd floor, like right by all the execs. And at some point, I just did funny voices all the time and stuff. And I did Shaggy from Scooby Doo a lot. Hopefully I can do it today. But and then at one point, someone came up and said, "Quick, we need a Shaggy. Anyone?" And then everyone said, "Matt Danner will do it." And I was like, "Hey, Scoob." And I just did the voice for him. And they said, "Get down here." And they Taft-Hartley'd me into SAG. And for a long time, I was doing, I was understudying for Casey Kasem. He was getting a little older, and he wasn't doing as many roles for Shaggy, like commercials or DVD extras or songs or toys. So I would go in there and fill in for him, all uncredited. But that's how I kind of got into acting, and that's how I met Joe Sikta, who was the producer at the time, the EP for all the Scooby stuff at the time. Who eventually was my boss on for the dev team that did 3 Caballeros years and years and years later. But I've jumped around since then. But that was my first big, like, I'm in animation now, and this is my life now. So that all that Warner Brothers time spanned I'd say about 5 years. And it was really cool.
One thing we've heard when we've spoken with people involved in animation is that, when you work in animation, you've got to be fond of the medium. That would be what draws you to it. So what are some, it sounds like Scooby Doo is definitely one of those shows that you were fond of that really influenced you. What are some others? All
the really early stuff. Early Mickey Mouse cartoons, Donald Duck, I was a big fan of. He just was the funniest to me. Like I found him funnier than I know it's a toss up between Donald and Goofy, in terms of comedy. But I like Donald because he was, for me, the most real. Because I really felt bad for him a lot, but also I also felt he kind of deserved what he got,
Right.
And his frustration and things like that. He reminded me of my dad a lot, because my dad would get really frustrated over things, and then, out of frustration, make matters worse, and I felt like that was just Donald in a nutshell. So he was always really funny to me. And when he would freak out and start just babbling, I always found that really funny. Bugs Bunny, I grew up on Bugs Bunny cartoons, Yogi Bear, like all the classics. My folks were real good about, showing me, the classic cartoons. And then I grew up in the 80s. So like, things like, Transformers and Ninja Turtles and Smurfs and, all that kind of stuff, I got really into. But really when I knew I wanted to do cartoons for real, like when it clicked for me was during the early days of Nickelodeon, when they started doing like, their whole, like, I think it was like called Snick or something like that, where they had Saturday Night Nick, where they had a lot of cartoons like that. And then Cartoon Network followed suit, and then Disney. And then suddenly, like, it was sort of a creator driven world of brand new cartoons that were coming out like rapid fire. And then things like, and then reimaginings like Batman the Animated Series were coming out. And at that point I should have been probably too old for cartoons, because this is like, now I'm in high school, but I didn't care because I was watching, Powerpuff Girls and Dexter's Lab and, all that stuff. And then, those were kind of the ones that shaped me, I'd say. And then I got into, I always liked anime growing up. Like I watched a lot of Dragon Ball, before it was cool. And then when Dragon Ball Z came out and Toonami started showing stuff, I was like, oh, this is awesome. And I really appreciated the craft of anime, like how, you could just tell they really, really worked hard to get whatever was on the screen onto the screen. and for me I made that connection with figure drawing and stuff. And so, it says on my IMDb, like someone put it on there that, I use anime influence in my work. And I'd say that's true to a certain extent, because I enjoy, how they use the camera, how the camera felt very real. Yeah. And how structured everything is. And in terms of like, everything is drawn through, even if it's stylized, like it's almost 3-dimensional. That's why I think, a lot of anime translates into toys really well. So when I started getting into more digital animation later on, I was really into like a 3D camera and being able to move around and being able to and so with something like Muppet Babies, which is like a hybrid show, I have a lot of fun with the camera. And, that's something that I think traditionally you don't think about when you're doing more flatter cartoons. But, yeah.
You worked on Gravity Falls, correct?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of our fans out there are definitely fans of Gravity Falls. And I feel like that show was a great show that blossomed a lot of other people's careers into a lot of the new Disney shows that are out there. Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I met Alex when he was on. I was actually at Disney doing development. I was under a development deal at the time, and I keep coming back to it's funny. Like every time I go somewhere, like I end up back in development for a little bit, and worked on a lot of stuff. But yeah, no. So he was doing Gravity Falls, and at that point, things were pretty much good. I had consulted with him a little bit on some writing stuff. As he was staffing up, and getting just sort of figuring out going to series. And then I didn't work on it for a while until, I think they needed an extra guy doing some storyboards and some drawings. And so I just popped in for a bit and got to play, and that was a lot of fun. I think I worked on like 2 episodes or something like that. And at one point they had asked if I wanted to take on more, and honestly I would have, but I was doing so much on the development side that I just didn't feel like it would have been fair, because I was already spread pretty thin, and I worry about burning out sometimes when it comes to using too many parts of the same brain, and storyboarding takes a lot out of you. It's a very focused medium, and the drawing mileage is high, and problem solving is high, and really, to be a good board artist, you really need to be able to focus and dedicate. And so I didn't want to, I sometimes I look back and I go like, man, I could have stuck in on that, but at the same time, it was a lot of fun, and he's always been very good to me, and it was a good time.
I find it really interesting. With social media, we get an even greater glimpse into the, behind the curtain on these shows and seeing how things are made. And there's a lot of people out there who, once an episode is aired or some time has passed, they're able to share storyboards. And so especially with following the new DuckTales series, we've got to see a lot of storyboards over the last couple of years. And it's a really impressive craft. Like it blows me away to see, exactly what you're saying, the amount of detail and the storytelling that's taking place, and yet the simplistic drawing. And I know some people go into a lot more detail with their storyboards, and some people, some shows really push for it to be a little more simplistic. It's really, really interesting. It's kind of seeing that go from a comic book to a show.
Oh yeah. No, and then comic books are good. When I explain storyboards to people who aren't animation, I always say it's like a comic book. It's like a really posed out comic book, where all the panels are the same size, and there's no word bubbles. Although sometimes there are. I find myself just to kind of get through a board, sometimes putting word bubbles in on another layer, just so I don't have to deal with typing stuff in. But yeah, no. And it's funny now that you mentioned that, I'm like, I wonder, I think I know I have those storyboards somewhere. I back everything up. So I'm sure I'm sitting next to a terabyte that probably has them on there somewhere, but I just never thought to dust them off, after all these years. But yeah, no, I actually got some funny boards out of that. A lot of good Grunkle Stan stuff.
Oh, nice. Recently, you've been working on a couple projects that we want to spend some time on, and let's talk about Muppet Babies for a moment. Now, I've read some things about your passion for your character in Muppet Babies, And so I'd like to, kind of hear you tell the story of why this show means so much to you, because it means a lot to my family. I can tell you, my kids love the show, and they're probably, I don't really know the age range on the show. They're probably the back end of it because they're 6 and 8, but they love it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like if you're talking about preschool as a demographic, you're looking at probably 2 to 5. Oh. But this is what's known as more of a transitional show. So it's something that sort of takes you from, something like Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, which is a lot more talking to the camera and a lot more like, do you see the red square? And sort of creates more of a narrative and deals with more kind of social scenarios. And we try to pack a lot more jokes in and things like that, just to kind of hold an older audience. But what we've really done too is, which is funny about this show is that, we really did focus on the parent as well, and the Muppet fans who are parents, and try to make something that they want to watch with their kids. And we get a lot of letters and a lot of, tweets and posts and things like that, just of people saying that their kids are already asleep, but they're still up watching Muppet Babies all night.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 38. I think I'm 38, and I feel like I'm part of the demographic, and I'm getting the jokes, and I'm having the song stuck in my head, and it's just such an awesome time where I have a 1-year-old, and he's gonna get to grow up on Muppet Babies and DuckTales like I did.
Yeah, and that was sort of the idea, because again, the Muppet brand, has grown up a lot with their audience, but. And this kind of goes into how I was introduced to Kermit, who is, it's funny because you mentioned my favorite cartoon shows, and I never really considered Muppets a cartoon, even though it's very cartoony because it was real, it was an actual physical thing. But I grew up on Sesame Street. And so, I had, Kermit and Bert and Ernie, and Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch and Snuffleupagus and Barkley and, everybody, Cookie Monster and Grover. And they were all in my house, every morning because that was my preschool show. That was my preschool show, and I think what I really dug about it as a kid that I still like about it now is it was really groovy, like the songs were really catchy. The comedy was really funny. Like it's still funny. Like I watch, Sesame Street shorts of just like Kermit we did a whole episode of Director Kermit because we were watching, those Forgetful Jones, movie set sketches that they did with Kermit trying to direct Forgetful Jones, but he kept on forgetting his lines or his action. And Kermit just going, cut, wrong. You got to go over the door. And he's like, right, over the door, and it was just funny how, these characters were so real in the fact that it seemed like they were trying to put on a show, but then they would get tripped up and frustrated by each other. And then that's when they would kind of open up to the audience, and suddenly I felt like, oh wow, like they're talking to me, like they're really talking to me, which I always found really interesting. So that's how I got to know Kermit, and then from there, that was my intro to Muppets, and then I got to grow up with them, and I grew up with them through Muppet Show, into the movies, and I was a little younger than when Muppet Show first came out, but I remember discovering it, after I had already become familiar with Kermit and going, whoa. And I remember watching the movies, like Great Muppet Caper was on repeat at my house as a kid.
And that Christmas special every year.
Oh yeah. And the Muppet Babies are in that too, right? When they do the family footage, which is so funny because the whole Muppet Babies thing keeps changing. Like there's really no, it's funny talking with the Muppet folk because there's really no exact canon to how they all met and how they all know each other. Because in like Muppet Caper, like Fozzie and Kermit are twin brothers. You know what I mean? And in Muppets Take Manhattan, they all just graduated college together. Where in Muppet Movie, they all met on a road trip, and then on the Muppet Show, they're all meeting for the first time, Scooter shows up and he goes, my dad owns a theater. And Kermit's like, you're hired, and that's how it went. But, so anyway, yeah. So I had a deep affinity for it. And very much like how I was introduced to it, the theory was, we should, kids don't really know who these characters are anymore, because their parents do. And their parents are trying to go like, hey, let's go see like the Jason Segel Muppet movie. Like that whole movie was sort of like, hey, remember Kermit? How cool is this? Look at, where are they now? You know, let's bring them all back together and let's remember who they are. And that was very successful. But it was kind of a one-off, you know, and it didn't, and they did the second movie, which was more of a straight sequel, which was interesting because that's something that the Muppets had never done before. But then it's still, you know, even that movie came out 5 years after the first one. And so you had kids that weren't even born yet when the first one came out that were going to see the second one, you know? And so our thought was, well, let's introduce Kermit to the kids again. Like, let's just start over, you know, like let's start from scratch, and then parents who grew up with it can enjoy it. And then kids who've never heard of these characters before can get to know them. And one of the big, you know, points that I wanted to, you know, add to the show was how they look, because I was like, we can't animate it like the old show, because if you look at a drawing of baby Kermit from the old show and you look at a puppet of adult Kermit, it's not 1-to-1. You know, they're not even the same color green. Like the Kermit from the 80s, you know, version of Muppet Babies was sort of like a dark forest green. Meanwhile, like, you know, the adult Kermit's almost neon, you know. I mean, he's not quite neon, but he's a lot lighter. And so our thought was, well, let's take Muppets Take Manhattan as an example and try to build that in CG so it's still animated like the old show. But if you showed a kid a picture of baby Kermit and a picture of adult Kermit, they would know it's the same character. And it worked. So now, you know, we kind of have a whole new audience. The show's doing very well. I keep hearing that it's been a while since, you know, we got a little while before season 2 comes out, but we did those puppet shorts and those are all doing very well. And that was another thing, another test, because, you know, now we turned the CG versions of the characters into actual Muppets and then filmed them with real kids, you know, which was, and it's funny because people look at the puppets and they're like, wow, it looks just like the show. And we're like, yeah, but the show looks just like the puppets from the earlier thing. So it's this weird sort of, you know, cyclical joke that keeps happening. But anyway, that was really the intent, was to be able to reintroduce them to the world and go, look, kids, like, these are the Muppets. And now hopefully, you know, kids can grow up with them again. You know, it's sort of a whole new generation.
I feel like y'all have been successful too. I mean, just gauging from my own kids and seeing the merchandise out on the shelves and or what's left of it on the shelves, because, and one of the things that I really appreciate about it is exactly what you said. You take the parent into account. And I think we're in a good age, like where shows are right now is in a good place, because I think a lot of shows are taking the parents into account, because my kids are much more likely to watch something if I can stand it on the television. And then if I can actually get into it too, we're probably going to watch it twice as much. And I love when they turn the show on and we get to sit down and enjoy the characters, because they were important to me. Muppet shows, one of my all-time favorite shows. I'd love to just sit down and you know, watch that show for a while, just binge it. And my kids now get it a little bit more, and I think that's really cool, because they didn't really have as many puppets or Muppets in their childhood. Everything did go CG. And so for them, when I would try to show them one of the movies or something, they didn't get into it as much, but they have watched the most recent one since, and they enjoyed it. And of course, anytime someone in our house goes, "Mana," you're going to, you know, everybody starts singing.
Nice. Yeah. And they're in the show too. We put them right in that. We literally, like, any Muppets that we couldn't squeeze into the first season, we like put on the walls and stuff.
Right.
You know, because again, the one thing about those rigs, like, those are very complex rigs. Like those puppets, they're almost like CG puppets, are extremely complicated, including just how their fur and their feathers and their flop works. And we call it jiggle tech, which is basically it's a simulation that's built into every part of the Muppet that we can dial to make them feel more realistic. And all the fabrics and all the textures and everything are taken directly from the adult Muppets, directly from the Muppet Studio.
Oh, that's cool.
And even, it's funny because, you know, a lot of people are like, well, who's the penguin? And it's kind of funny because even that was based out of a joke that Jim Henson used to tell. Because, you know, it's no secret that, you know, there's not a lot of women characters in the Muppet cast. And so one of our, you know, things was, you know, we have room for 6 in the first season. We have 6 Muppets, and you know, we were talking about at one point doing Janice, but the issue with doing Janice on her own was that she really comes with the rest of Electric Mayhem, Whereas even though Animal is part of that band, he sort of already established himself as a singular character that can do things without the rest of the band. But what was funny is when we're trying to figure out what animal to do, we went through, which should be a monster? Is that too much like Animal? Should it be a weird thing? Is that too much like Gonzo? We don't want to do another frog. We don't want to do another pig. So we went through lots and lots of animals. But one thing that Jim always said, when they needed a joke at the end of a bit, was they're like, we need a button. We need a joke here. He goes, just throw some penguins at it. And that's when those penguin Muppets would come in and just start squawking and doing a tap dance and stuff. And so that was our gag. We actually knew that gag and we used that as a joke. We just threw a penguin at it, and then she got picked. So even though she's a new character, she came out of a very organic place that we feel is at least paying tribute to how Muppets were created back in the day.
That's a great story. How Summer became to be, and I know her merchandise flies off the shelves as well. So
yeah.
People must be taking her. That's awesome.
Yeah, kids dig her. And again, we got this season, we got Bunsen and Beaker in, we got Rolf in, and I can't tell you who's going to show up next season, but I can tell you there's going to be a lot more Muppets. Nice. A lot more of your favorite Muppets.
Okay, because I was gonna say Walter is my favorite Muppet.
It might be a little while for Walter, but
okay.
We're digging deep. We're digging deep first.
Nice. So I love, and you also do the voice for Rolf, and I think that came out really well. I love the songs. That's one of those songs that got stuck in my head for months now. So
cool.
I love that. That rendition of the character is great. And I think all the cast is really fun, and it's Muppet Babies, and Kermit is kind of like the most popular and well-known Muppet, but I think everybody finds a Muppet they can love from this show, and all the characters are great.
Yeah, and that's really what we strive to do too. Because again, we're looking at this as we want everyone to have a favorite Muppet, and we want to be able to spotlight people. We have our main six, but it's turning into a sort of a revolving door of who's showing up today, as we go into later episodes. So that's kind of fun too, And we leave clues. We do leave clues. So if you look at who's on the walls, who's in the portraits and who's not, might be an indication of who may or may not be showing up.
And that's been really cool on social media because, you have a lot of adults having conversations about, look, so-and-so's in the background and these characters were there. And that's when you know you're doing it right. And I feel like this show's just been right.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate it. We like it. It's fun to do.
Well, let's transition over to talking about Legend of the Three Caballeros. Now,
yes,
this we already kind of talked about it, kind of led into it. We woke up one morning and it was Danny. There's this there's someone that we talk with online on Twitter who's like, wait a minute, did you all know that this was out? And we were like, we have never heard, we've not seen anything about this show.
Yeah, what are you talking about? You had to have made this up, because when would that happen? That's too great to happen overnight.
Yeah, I know, and I am familiar with Danny, and I really do appreciate all the pot banging that went on there to kind of get people to get hip to it, because at that point, we really were not allowed to talk about it, because it wasn't supposed to be out like that. You know what I mean?
Right. So do you know, so for anyone who maybe didn't catch what happened, the entire series aired, I don't remember if it was all released at once or if it aired weekly, but it was released on an app in the Philippines. It was I don't know if it was a test market or
Disney Life.
Disney, yes.
Yeah. It kind of was.
Okay.
That sort of was like a beta version of Disney Plus. So the funny thing is, so here's how it all kind of got started. So, there was, I think at Disney at the time, there was a lot of push to sort of get, to reintroduce, classic characters back to the mainstream audience, and the Mickey Mouse shorts, for instance, were a very successful version of that. And I actually my office was right next to Paul Rudish, during all that time. And I, would come in and just gag out stuff with him early on. And I'd like to think I have a couple of jokes in there. I really pushed really hard for Mortimer, who ended up finally making it in.
Yeah.
Because I used to love that cartoon with Mortimer and Mickey, and them competing for Minnie's affection.
The one with the car out on the picnic.
Yeah, the one with the anthropomorphic car and the bull and stuff. And hiya, Mick. And it's just like, and Mickey just really, really didn't like to see this guy. But Minnie's like swooning over him. And I actually had done a little bit of, I'd done some shorts, but none of them actually, a lot of the shorts that I did never actually were produced, because that's the development process. But I got to be involved on it to a certain extent, and that was a lot of fun. So I had some experience, and I had just, in between that, working on like Gravity Falls and Wander Over Yonder and sort of those Disney TVA shows, I'd actually left for a couple of years to direct 3 Hot Wheels movies for Mattel, and some other. I did some stop motion WWE cartoons and things like that. But those were with Mercury Filmworks, because I have a good relationship with them, and I'd worked with them a lot at Disney, and so they actually worked on 3 Cabs as well. So there's sort of a theme there in terms of the people involved, just trying to push the digital medium as good as we can. But so I got a call from Joe Sikta, who is the leader of a new team at Disney called Advanced Media. And basically the point of Advanced Media was kind of to fill in the gap that existed that wasn't TV or movies. That was linear entertainment for anything but TV and movies. And that sort of meant streaming. But really it more meant like games and books, and because we were part of publishing. And so there was sort of a lot of, and I wish I could tell you about some of the other projects that we were up to, but I cannot. But 3 Cabs was one of them. And that was the first one that they brought me in for, to just kind of give them a take on it, because there were rumors that I think DuckTales was getting sort of ramping up or it was starting to go into development. And that was sort of a specific show that was, that had its own unique style and was playing in one direction, but publishing, in Latin America really wanted to do something with the 3 Caballeros, but they wanted classic Donald Duck. They wanted the 40s Donald. They wanted these characters to look like they just got done with the movie and they were now doing their own show. And I was like, well, that's a really tall order, because that's feature animation, But I had some talks with some of the folks over at Mercury Filmworks, and we kind of devised sort of a puppeteering style to make a really high-end rig that could emulate more of the 40s style with Donald. At the end of the day, we were tasked to make a quality show, streaming show, that we could tie into comic books. And that's why we wanted to, kind of go dig into the Barks universe. We actually focused a little bit more on the Don Rosa side because, we didn't want to step on DuckTales, webbed feet, I would say, because, they were clearly, going in more the Barks direction. So, a lot of the 3 Caballeros comics were Rosa comics. So if you notice, a lot of the characters that kind of show up that are on the Duck family tree are more from the Rosa side, like Clinton Coote and things like that. But we did our research and then we kind of, the one thing about on this show that was a little bit of a challenge is like, okay, well, so, they got a magic book and they're going to be flying around the world and, experiencing things, but what's the story now? And where does the human woman come in? Cause in 3 Caballeros movie, they're running around on like in beaches and clubs and they're hanging out and in the movie poster, it's them with like a dancer. Mm-hmm. So we kind of had the idea of, kind of blending Disney universes and saying, well, what if all the kind of mythical beings are human, like the gods and things like that. And we kind of were saying like, like Hercules and like, things like that. Now, while we couldn't specifically, dig into Disney features, we wanted to at least draw from it. So if you notice, everywhere we go on that show is we reference another Disney movie, to some extent. In one way or another, and do sort of our spin on it, with the intent being that we would create the series that could then tie into books. And whether or not that's still the plan is yet to be seen. But But we had a lot of, meetings with character voices and publishing and stuff like that, just to make sure that what we were doing was right. And we did a lot of work with Latin America and, Mexico and Brazil. And even EMEA and all of sort of the worldwide brands, just to make sure that, we were being respectful and kind of worked within what they wanted to, get from the experience. And that was really bringing together a lot of comics, audiences, because, Jose is very popular in Brazil, and that's he's got a ton of comic books down there. And, Donald obviously does very well in Europe, and in the North America, and in Japan and in Asia too. And Panchito does very well in Mexico. So we were thinking, wow, this is, 3 birds with 1 stone, to a certain extent. And that's sort of where it all was born from. And then it was about coming up with a story. And, what we figured was, one thing, and I've dealt with this a lot, when you reboot projects, which is how many people actually remember this character? Like not the one on the t-shirt, not the one that you see running around the park. It's like, who actually remembers, when was the last time you saw a Donald Duck cartoon? And it was interesting because it not a lot, because even I was like, I got to rewatch these. And I was like, wow, boy, he's really, he's kind of like the Larry David of cartoon characters, like he really gets himself into lots of trouble, because he'll be selfish, or he'll get too angry, and he is mostly the cause of his own suffering. But that's usually when the cartoon ends, so it's like he'll burn his house down, lose his job, and Daisy will break up with him, and then it'll just iris out. And that sort of became the joke, which is where we go, well, let's just do a classic Donald Duck cartoon for the first 7 minutes. And then instead of irising out, we'll iris back open, and then we'll give him a redemption story where we actually give Donald a chance to get his life back together. And that's what got me the gig. And then from there, it was just a matter of kind of figuring out what the story was and what the characters were and what the world was. And we definitely wanted to do something that was sort of in its own world. So, we went with the Mythical Realms because we figured, they had the magic book and they could kind of go places where, you don't usually go. So, when they travel to Egypt, they find, magic robots. And then when they go to Stonehenge, they find, this whole Black Cauldron universe, and that became a lot of fun, tying it all together and kind of figuring out the story. And that's where Zandra came from, because we were like, well, they need a guide, and it's perfect because we need that human character to go on this journey with them. And she has to be magical. Because there's no humans in Duckburg, they're all ducks and pigs and chickens and stuff. So that was kind of where it all was born from. I will say though, that it was interesting because we wanted to set the bar high going in. And so we really gave it an epic intro just to sort of set the table, because, like any good show, like we were thinking of it as a long movie. And that sort of, was the question, because we actually, when we first started developing it, didn't really know where it was going to go, because Disney Plus hadn't quite become a thing yet. There was Disney Life, which was being developed by a part of our team, and was sort of a testing ground for doing streaming Disney stuff. So in a sense, that was sort of it was a test. It was sort of a beta test to see how people would download the content or how they would stream the content, get an idea of analytics and things like that. I'm sure they've vastly improved on it. But it was a really cool thing because we actually, that was, and it had a few test markets, which were in Europe and the Philippines. And again, that was our charge, is like, we were doing something specific. We were trying to do, we wanted to harken back to that kind of style. Like, again, originally we were shooting for a 40 style. We actually had to, it was funny. Because while we were all getting staffed up, we realized that no one could really draw Donald, because he's hard to draw, like classic Donald, and let alone make him move around and stuff. So we actually brought in an expert. We brought in Bob McKnight, who'd done a ton of. I worked with him on Looney Tunes way back, and he was as close as you can get to that classic style. I mean, there's a lot of people who also can come close, but I had a really good relationship with him, and he understood, the digital pipeline as well. So he became sort of our Donald whisperer, and he taught everyone. We did classes where we taught everyone how to draw Donald, how to move him around, and then we actually brought him up to Canada to Atomic Cartoons. Ended up doing all the production animation for the show, and he went up there, and we sort of trained everybody on how to like make the rigs move like a classic character would. You know, and again, I mean, you know, we were on a TV budget, but I think we got, you know, a pretty darn good product out of it at the end of the day. And, you know, we really spent a lot of time with the camera and the effects and, you know, and really crafting the story and making sure the episodes were tight as a drum. And, you know, we got a lot of support while we were doing it, which was great. Not a lot of, you know, it didn't feel, it wasn't a chore, you know, like, cause there was a lot of people that had to kind of sign off on this thing. And, you know, once they did, you know, they were very, very supportive. And actually Tony Anselmo, who does Donald Duck, he was there. He was consulting on scripts, and we had him come in and meet all the board artists and stuff. And, you know, we would sit down and go through everything before he recorded to just make sure this is something that Donald could say, you know, because there's a lot of rules on what Donald can and can't say, because, you know, the way the voice works, pronunciation is really tough. And then we had a whole team. We actually had a bunch of audio engineers that would go through all of his lines and actually clean them up and make them even more audible. And they would squish the S's so they weren't as slushy, and they would tighten the consonants and stuff. So there was a lot of real audio trickery going on just to make sure that he was as audible as possible. And we did the old trick that, you know, Disney used to do, where we would, once we had a dialogue track, we would just play it for people, and we would see if they could understand it. You know, we'd play it for the crew and see if what they could and couldn't understand. And if they couldn't understand it, we either re-recorded it or rewrote it. So we were trying to be as classic as possible. We were really trying to kind of harken back to that sort of mentality, but in a more modern, you know, digital style.
And Tony at a convention recently said that this was one of his favorite projects he's worked on. So
yeah, he was great. I mean, he's Donald. He's Donald. And, you know, and he's got he knows Donald. So it was a bit of a learning curve, but yeah, no, we're still very close. And I still talk to him every now and again. He always goes, "So what's going on with Donald Duck? What's going on with Caballeros?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Have you heard anything?" And he's like, "Yeah, I heard it's happening." You know, and so he actually talked about it on a panel recently. And but yeah, no. So, you know, it's words getting out, and you know, I think there'll probably be more official releases, but it's, you know, the word is out. The word is.
Well, I think there's gonna be a lot of Jose and Panchito fans that are gonna be wanting merchandise and more from those characters as well.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, you know, Eric Bauza, obviously, you know, he's a very prolific voice actor nowadays, but, you know, he does a lot of you know, Latin voices. He was Puss in Boots, and you know, he works a lot with Jorge Gutierrez, who's a good friend. And it was interesting because it was actually really tough, you know, casting for this, because, you know, we knew, you know, we went around, we definitely had auditions, and we spent a lot of time kind of nailing it down, but then eventually it had to be signed off by you know, Latin America and Disney Brazil and things like that. And you know, Bauza and Jaime Camille made the cut. So, and it was great having Jaime on, because he was just like, he added such and I know he also does a Don Carnage on DuckTales, and he's a treat to work with. And he just added such an innocence to Panchito that I think was necessary. The other thing that we really wanted to do is make sure that, you know, if you go back and listen to the character voices from the original cartoon, you know, those were all famous actors that were playing them. Mm-hmm. But I always, even as a kid, had a tough time kind of delineating between the voices. So that was something that we really tried to do, is make sure that between Donald, Jose, and Panchito, that they all sounded really, really different from each other, so that you could pick them out just by hearing them, you know. And we sort of played up to, you know, how they, you know, the suaveness of Jose, and, you know how he's a ladies' man, but he always seems to be $1 short, you know. And Panchito is just like, you know, blissfully unaware of how dangerous the situation he's getting into is, but he just likes the excitement and the rush of it. And I really think that came out, but yeah, it's a great cast, and we really had a good time with it.
So yeah, you mentioned that you had some more obscure characters you were working on. I don't want to spoil too much, but Daisy's nieces kind of make an appearance, and those are more obscure characters that show up in there. And I thought that was really smart, kind of to bring in these kind of characters because we always see Huey, Dewey, and Louie, but we don't see April, May, and June. And it was just kind of a nice little twist that, like, I don't know, I thought that was really cool, a way to bring those characters kind of back out into kind of the limelight.
Yeah. And, that was sort of the rub, because we were like, we know we want to get some triplets in here. We want some kids in here. And we also, because I feel like they were sort of our modern, because one thing that we didn't want to do is just give Donald a cell phone and say, he's modern now. What our sort of pitch was we'll take Donald and we'll drag him kicking and screaming into the 21st century, whether he likes it or not. And that was kind of the mentality behind it. And we do that. We play to that joke a lot on the show where, the myth of old is one way, but then we see it now years and years and years later. And now we get to see sort of the modern take on what used to be. In April, May, and June, kind of filled the role. Obviously we wanted to have the triplets, but again, we didn't want to step on DuckTales and sort of, because we knew that Huey, Dewey, and Louie would definitely be there. And that's another reason why we sort of took Donald out of Duckburg. We actually physically take him out of Duckburg and put him in another place where we created sort of a third town that, can be sort of, you could say, was referential to the comics. And the nieces are really, we wanted them to keep everybody honest, because they were supposed to be sort of our gauge on like what's normal, while all this crazy stuff is going on. And they worked out really well. And Jessica DeChico actually did the voice of all three. And it was really funny, like, because she would, once we figured out, she's a really talented voice. Actually, she's Summer Penguin too, which is hilarious. Like, it's so funny how you just kind of, and Dee Bradley Baker is the Araquan bird. And, Ari, and anyway, sorry, I just made that sort of connection. It's been that long. But she was great because we literally said, okay, so April's sort of the leader, and she's kind of bright and cheery, but she's no nonsense and she's sharp. And so she sort of found that voice. And we said, and May is sort of dry and almost more of the kind of, blasé, sarcastic one. And so she sort of found that voice. And then June was sort of the kind of the sweet, sugar-coated one that, tries to find always the bright side of what's going on. And it was crazy because I would watch her, I'd ask her, I'd like, do you want to record all three of these voices separately? Do you want to do one and the other? She goes, no, I can do it. And she would just dial between the three of them. And it was crazy.
Oh, that's cool.
It was amazing to watch, but she really brought something to those characters. And I think a lot of, we had the ability to sort of add as we went, so while we had a lot of scripts written before we really started, we were able to sort of adjust them as we went into storyboard and animatic based on the performance of the actors. So like Feldrake and Shelled Goose, which were Kevin Michael Richardson was Feldrake, the wizard, and Wayne Knight was Shelled Goose. I knew I wanted to just put those guys next to each other and see what happened. But where their characters went was pretty much organic. Like we kind of knew what we wanted at the beginning. We knew like one was going to be sort of more the rube, who doesn't really know a lot, and then the angry one who's just like impatient. But as their characters went, I mean, they just made them their own. And sometimes I feel like those are my two favorite characters in the show. I'm just watching. I could watch those guys for hours, just like try to do their taxes, and I think that would be entertaining. Gray Delisle was our Zandra, and I worked with Gray a lot over the years, and she was just fabulous.
And Jim Cummins got in there too, right?
Yeah, no, he did. I don't want to ruin anything, but yeah, he's in there. He plays some characters you may or may not recognize. Mm-hmm. But yeah, because again, we really wanted, while I know, we definitely, we had some we did some stunt casting, and we had some really interesting, celebrities come in and do voices. A lot of the main cast, we really wanted it to feel like basically a cartoon that you may have watched in the 90s. You know what I mean? Like a Disney afternoon show, and I think that, a lot of those actors really brought that warmth to it.
I had one question from something that you brought up earlier, and maybe you can speak to it, maybe you can't. You were talking about the show and kind of how it was written. Do you know, and can you say, if the show was written to be binge? So was it kind of written with that in mind? You said it was not necessarily the streaming service, but that it was going to be some sort of...
it was made as a continuous streaming show that was made to binge.
Okay.
We did write the episodes so they were fairly self-contained, except for the first two.
Okay.
That was kind of a pilot that got so big it broke in half. Where we got to a point where we were like, should we cut this down? And we were like, well, not really, because sort of the whole first cartoon, we really just needed to get to know the characters. Because we felt like, because originally we were going to introduce Zandra right after the first commercial break, or act break, I should say. Again, we did actually make this just in case, because again, we didn't know, because overseas we were like, oh, well, they might air this on TV or something. We don't know. So we made it just so that it would fit, but it was intended as a bingeable streaming show. But we realized that we really didn't have enough time to get to know everybody before we really got into it. And that was sort of our goal, was to say, look, this first episode is just to get everyone caught up. Like, here's Donald. This is Donald. This is his life. This is why he has so many problems. This is why we're going to root for him when he gets a second chance. You know what I mean? This is the through line that we want to sort of, bait and sort of and lay down. And then same with Jose and Panchito, we introduced them simultaneously, but in a way we even introduced them to Donald, because again, where this lies in the timeline is fuzzy, and that's on purpose. But again, we knew that we can't have these characters show up and have everybody go, hey, it's you and you, because nobody remembers them, and that's not true. Fans remember them, but right. New audiences don't. And we also wanted to let them in on the joke. And that was sort of our intention. So we decided to just let them breathe, and we decided to let them hang out. And really, it sort of turned into a Three Stooges cartoon. The second episode which is sort of the first half of the first episode, or the second half of the first episode, is more like where the show it lies in terms of what to expect from the show. That was to say, like, okay, now we know these characters. Now let's create this inciting incident, and now let's show you what the show really is. And we tried to tease that at the very beginning. Like, when you watch the very beginning of the show, like, there's no mistake where we're going with this thing. Like, we're not messing around,
Yeah, and the concept of how you guys, or how you, I'm not sure who all was involved, but how you came up with the story of this is where the shorts normally end. This is what would come after. It's pretty awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that's what people really dug about it, because one thing that people were kind of worried about, I'll be totally honest with you, is, Donald, if not handled correctly, can be very unlikable. Mm-hmm. And so it's very important to be able to humanize him to a certain extent, or duckanize him. But then, like any good story, most stories start with, a character that you like, but that's flawed. And through the course of their story, they learn to, they learn to heal their wounds and become better. And that was sort of the intent of the show as a overarching thing.
Very cool. Matt, we want to respect your time. Do you have a moment to go through a few questions that we got on social media?
Absolutely.
We did this in a way we didn't really tell people you were going to be on yet. We're going to announce that tonight. We like to wait just to make sure everything works out. And but we asked people, we said, okay, we're finally going to talk about it. What questions do you have? And so we have a few. And I think the first question that I would bring up that you may or may not be able to answer, but you can at least tell us what we should do. Zarfan Zamkuri, and I'm sure I said that wrong, but they've been a long-time follower of ours and is always communicating with us. They wanted to know, is there a second season or has it been canceled?
I can't speak to that.
Okay.
But I can say that anything is possible.
Watch the show when it comes out.
Yeah.
That's going to be key. We don't know what's going to happen. And like you said, it's been like 5 years since the show began.
Yeah, almost. Yeah. I mean, it was, well, maybe a little less than that, but
okay.
Yeah, we finished it just before. Oh no, I know we finished it. Oh man, I can't even do the math. Before it was leaked, we probably finished it about 6 months prior to that.
Okay.
I want to say, or maybe a little less. So if you do the math, that was a year ago. So, I mean, like 2 or 3 years. Yeah.
Okay.
But I can say that, where it's going was always the intention at the end of the day. And whether or not it continues, I think might also depend on, people watching it.
Yeah, and I think they will once it's actually talked about more.
Yeah.
And I mean, they released that great promotional poster for it.
Yeah.
And I feel like once people know that the show exists, and they're going to be very surprised. Yeah. And they're going to binge watch it and want more and more and more. And I think it's a great time for this show because of the DuckTales popularity. And yeah. If anything, I think a lot more people are going to ride the Mexico ride at Epcot now because they're going to know the characters a little bit more.
Yeah, I keep wanting to see if they can add the Araquan bird to the Tiki Room or something, because I'm like, that guy was, I was so happy we got to use that character, because. And trying to fit him into the universe was actually very interesting because he's kind of an everything character. If you go into Saludos Amigos and Three Caballeros. And so we just wanted to sort of give him meaning and you'll find it. And especially if you read between the lines with Ari, you'll see something special, I think.
Yeah. And D. Bradley Baker, I mean, he does a fabulous job with all of the characters.
He nailed it.
So a lot of the questions that we got actually does center around the second season or a possible second season. A lot of the stuff we've already talked about has kind of hit on the questions because I'm looking at them and we've got, Athui, who has been a big fan of the Cabs and was very excited about this show, was very interested in knowing how much of Jose's comic past might have influenced the character.
I would say a good amount. I'd say, we wanted to be very careful with canon, because again, with characters that are this old, there's a lot, you know what I mean? And so we had to be very specific, but yes, I can say that we definitely allude to it. But it exists in this universe. So yeah. Is that too vague?
No, that's good. Because, I mean, I know that character in particular has a very popular comic series that's been running for a long time. And I know she's a big fan of that series and likes to, she's a big fan of, and I don't know the name of the character, but he has a girlfriend in those comics. And she has commented a few times that she'd really, if the show were to continue, she'd like to see that character show up. So... I know those, and it's really cool. I like how you were talking about how you took the input from the other nations and, those cultures and making sure that these characters were appropriate, because I think that's a big deal in your show and also in DuckTales. I think the characters have grown a lot and are better than they were in the past. I'll put it that way.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think, I would say, obviously, yes. I'd like to think that, we're evolving the characters, as we go. But yeah, that's definitely something that we were trying to do, is sort of show more dimension. And by that, we actually dove in deep. on the comics and stuff, and made sure that what we chose to kind of spotlight was true to the source material. And again, we worked with publishing on this, and so we had access to everything, and we really dug through it. And our art director, Chris Moreno, who's a genius. I worked with him on Muppet Babies. We developed that together as well. He comes from comics, and so he has a great respect for it, and that really helped because we were really able to go through everything and really look at what we're dealing with here and try to make sure that we put in the right Easter eggs and we allude to the right things, and we don't step on things that might be contradictory just for a joke. So you will see, as again, I can honestly say that for the first arc of this adventure, we definitely focus on Donald. But Jose and Panchito definitely have their moments, and their stories, and they are mined directly from the comics.
That's cool. We're fans of the comics. We actually started our podcast and our website and everything from DuckTales, and because we grew up with the Disney afternoon, and then there were so many fans online saying, have you read the comics? Have you read the comics? And even though all three of us, we grew up reading comics, we missed those Uncle Scrooge and Donald Duck comics. And so we've been going back through Fantagraphics, who's kind of sponsored our show and come alongside us, and has really kind of helped us because they're putting out some great volumes, great quality stuff. And so this past year we got to read all of Rosa's work, and we did some specials on it online with people following with us, and it was really great. But to hear, when you said earlier that Rosa's work influenced the show, I think you're going to have a lot of people who are excited about that because he's got a lot of fans out there.
I think Rosa really did a good job of picking up where Barks kind of left off, because it's very specific, and I really like, Rosa built out the world even more, and that was sort of the family tree that we were using as our sort of like, look at this, and we kind of said, here's DuckTales on this side, and here's Three Caballeros on this side, and look at this, and we actually created more roots and things like that to back in time, because again, there's a lot of even where all this comes from, like in terms of the lore of the characters is from the comics. Like even just who Donald's ancestors are and how deep we dig, it's all technically canon. We had to fill in some blanks here and there because stories didn't exist for all these characters, but we definitely tried to make sure that it would fit into the lineage. If that makes sense.
Oh, you have some duck historians out there that are going to be looking at it for sure. So it does make sense. It's very cool. I love to hear the connectivity, and always when there's I don't really want to call it a source material, but something that influences the new product, the new show. It's very cool.
Yeah,
those callbacks are always welcome.
Yeah, and there's Easter eggs galore.
Yes, so I tried to stay away from those stories because there were already a lot of those, or not stories, conversations online. We really did have to push back a little bit from the community as far as talking about it, because we wanted to, like I said, we had a lot of people, when are you going to talk about it? When are you going to talk about it? And we're like, we're going to. We're going to wait till it's released just because we want to support it, and we don't really want to talk about it before it's out because we want people to watch it once it's out, and even an appeal to those who have already seen it. Make sure you watch it when it's out.
Yeah. Well, I hope that again, like that's really the thing, and I know a lot of people have seen it, and like it's unfortunate because that's the way our world works in terms of once somebody gets their hands on something, it ends up online,
Mm-hmm.
But I really am hoping that the fans actually dig into the show and watch it, legitimately when it comes out, because it will help. You know what I mean? It will, in all aspects, it'll help. And I just want people to see it for real, because I'm proud of it, and it was a lot of fun to do, and I really think that at the end of the day, I think people are going to dig it. I appreciate being asked, and I appreciate being able to say something, while we're still waiting for a few more official announcements. The good news is that, it seems like the world will finally be able to see this thing.
Well, we're just glad that you were able to come on, because, we've told people more privately, not so much online, but we've been talking about it. We reached out to you and you were like, absolutely, I want to talk about this as soon as I can talk about this.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. And the fact that, hey, I'm just going to tell people, you said, hey, we can talk about it. So we were like, Matt's really interested in talking about it. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah. We're hoping at a D23 Expo that they say something about it.
We'll see. We'll see. I mean, again, it's I don't know. That I don't know.
Right. Well, Matt, thanks for joining us. Thank you for all of your work, and we've become fans of your work. We love following you on social media. You're a lot of fun. Where could people follow you and find out what you're working on?
I mean, just follow my Twitter. It's Matty Danner, and basically there, I'll plug stuff, and I'll plug my friend's stuff. But I'm working on some secret projects that I'll be able to talk about sooner or later. But right now, it's all Muppets all the time.
And we're okay with that.
Yeah, me too.
Until the 3 Cabs get greenlit for a second season.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, we still want more Muppet Babies. You're just going to have to keep working harder.
Oh, thank you. Well,
no,
trust me,
find that
coming.
balance. Find that balance.
There's a lot of Muppet Babies coming. Don't you worry.
Awesome.
That I can say unequivocally.
As always, we hope you enjoyed that interview. We had a ton of fun talking with Matt. Such a great guy. We want to thank Matt Danner for coming on the show, talking with us, giving us a little bit of insight into the legend of the 3 Caballeros, telling us all those juicy details that went into making it, and kind of some behind the scenes of the pre-Disney Plus. That was really cool. We're looking forward to the show premiering on Disney Plus. We hope that it comes out in November. No word on whether or not that's official, although we expect that announcement to be coming soon. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you could always go to your favorite podcatcher and subscribe. Make sure you give us a like or a review, and help us spread the word about the community. Speaking of which, don't forget about our website. That's DuckTalks.com. You can go there for all the latest information that we come across about, anything DuckTales related. Disney. We also cover the Disney Afternoon. I think I've said that on this podcast. Anyway, we're also on Tumblr and Twitter at DuckTalks. That's where you can typically find us having conversations with others online about this stuff, and drop us a line. We'd love to talk with you. If you'd rather send us an email, you can send that to ducktalkspod@gmail.com. Well, I think that's going to do it for this week. Till next time, stay glom golden. Good night, guys. DuckTalks is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Any sounds or audio clips played on this podcast are the property of their copyright holders. Just wanted to get an alternative in there. Didn't feel right. Hey
you
there.
Do it again?
Nope. I got it. I got it with those two. One of those two is Primo. Hey there, and welcome to DuckTalks. Thanks for listening, and I hate how I open this show. Let me try that again. Hey there, and welcome to DuckTalks. Thanks for checking us out. If this is your first time, you're welcome. It's not right.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Just trying to get it all out of my system before Matt's on.
Just sing it.
Now I can't even think of the words. Still got my microphone really low, and it's bugging me. Anyway, one of these days I'll get this place set up. Maybe we're more flexible.
Do you want to start over?
Yeah.
Hey there, this is Mitch, and
I don't
welcome to
podcast
DuckTalks.
every week. I don't know what I'm doing. This is just all off the cuff.
This is why we started 30 minutes early.
Yeah. All right, I am going to start all over now because I don't know where to go back.